Welcome, Staffan, to the IoT For All Podcast. Thanks for being here this week.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I'd love to kick this off by having you give a quick introduction about yourself and the company to our audience.
Yeah, so my name is Staffan Eriksson. I am heading up the IoT Connectivity portfolio at Telia. I'm with you now from the Telia head office in Stockholm, Sweden. Telia is the number one connectivity provider in the Nordics and Baltic part of Europe. We are connecting 25 million customers. We have operations in both mobile and fixed networks in our footprint. And we are serving IoT customers since quite some time, even long before it was called IoT, when it was still called M2M. So we've been, running the initial infrastructure rollout of smart metering and so on long ago. So have a long history in IoT.
So I wanted to kick off this conversation around 5G. I think that's been a topic that has been talked about for quite some time, many years, just kind of leading up to 5G being available. Could you maybe start us off by talking about the current state of 5G in the IoT space? Is it really, how present is it, or how available is it? Is it really here? That's, I think, a question a lot of people ask.
That's all of the cellular 3GPP based technologies. It's a continuous evolution. If you're looking at 4G and take a step back, I think it took like 10 years and 6 releases of 3GPP to actually get it out there in the full-fledged service levels. And it's the same thing with 5G. It started to be standardized by 3GPP 5-6 years ago. There's still new releases coming out. But I think the difference when we look at 5G compared to 4G is that 5G is much more actually focused at enabling IoT use cases. Maybe that's not the way it's been formulated with 3GPP, but for IoT and enterprise use of digitalization capabilities, that's the main driver for 5G. So I would say that 5G is still under development and evolution, and it's also in an evolution from the ecosystem perspective. You need to have us as the operators implement the 5G standards. We need the device manufacturers to provide the devices and so on. And from a 5G perspective, the first phases or the first releases have been focused very much on increasing the bandwidth and the speeds in the radio network. So that is being rolled out now across the globe. I mean, it's the different phases in different parts of the globe. But I would say that the first IoT use cases that will benefit from 5G are the ones that are in need of more bandwidth and higher speeds, basically. And there we see a lot of use cases that are actually now being tested. There are pilots being done. There's the first commercial implementations. But they are very much focused on using the high capacity that comes with the 5G.
Do you have some examples of those use cases?
It could be, for instance, video surveillance. It could be self-driving cars. That kind of use cases where you need both high bandwidth and low latency in order to develop safe and strong applications. And we are today running innovation networks together with partners, with customers, with universities, where we test out these kind of use cases. So one area where it's being a lot of testing right now is around the automotive industry and the self-driving vehicles. These are the driving cases for us for setting up test sites. We're now, for instance, rolling out a 150 kilometers of 5G network for the testing of self-driving cars. That's typical kind of use cases where we see that the 5G will make a difference.
What are the benefits and drawbacks of using 5G and IoT? Obviously, you've talked about the data, the throughput, all those kinds of things, which are very important. But obviously, there's probably a cost side to it too, right? That has to be balanced out and has to necessarily, 5G needs to fit with the use case. It needs to, if it's overkill, it's you're incurring more costs, which bring down the opportunity for the ROI you're probably looking for. But what are the benefits and drawbacks of using 5G in IoT?
The major benefits is that it's not until 5G that I actually have the capacity to serve these use cases where you need higher bandwidth, lower latency. There's no other way of doing that using cellular technology. And of course, there are cost implications as well, but I think the values are by far overweighing that, because you will have so much to gain from using 5G in this kind of use cases. Then there are also other, aspects and values or possibilities coming with 5G, which are maybe not here now, but are coming in a couple of years. And that's where you have the benefits of what's called the massive machine type communication, where you can deploy 10 times as many sensors or devices within a given area, where you will have better power usage or lower power usage, and you will have better lifespan, and you will have better penetration. So that kind of simple sensors, simple devices that will be transmitting data less frequently, that will have a benefit from 5G, but that is not yet on the market. This is something that we will see maybe in a year or two.
When we're talking about 5G, then what happens to 4G? What happens to LTE? What happens to things connectivity that kind of comes before it? I know we've talked in the past on the podcast about the sunsetting of networks, 2G, 3G, depending on where you are. What happens to LTE? What happens to just other connectivity that came before it?
I would say that LTE and the IoT specific capabilities that it has on narrowband, for instance, that is still a technology that will be around for a long time. We see that the majority of the deployments in the coming 3-4 years will still be on LTE and on narrowband LTE. The benefit of this, or the opportunity with this, is that these technologies, the narrowband and the LTM technologies, will be supported also in 5G and the 5G radio network. So customers that are today selecting to go with those technologies, they will also be able to take the benefits of the 5G and the 5G network and 5G coverage over a long period. So there's no I would say sunset in near time or in a long time for those technologies.
Within 5G, where we are now, what are the next steps? What's happening next? What should people be kind of expecting, be on the lookout for in order for this to become more of a chosen technology? Obviously, it depends on the use cases and things like that, but what are the next steps with 5G and IoT?
I'd say that 5G, as it is an enabler of transformation of digitalization in an entirely new way, it's going to have an impact or possible impact on basically every industry, every kind of business, any kind of organization going forward. This also means that it's going to create a much more complex ecosystem. There's going to be a lot of parts that needs to be put together to have a solution in place. And this ecosystem is something that is now starting to be formed. We have the system integrators, you have the device suppliers, you have the cloud providers, you have the hyperscalers, you have all these different parties that will come together with the connectivity. And I would say that this is now being formed, and there's going to be, specific providers of services and solutions in different verticals and different applications. And it's much about forming these alliances and these ecosystems to be able to address the customer's needs and meet the requirements in a good way. So it's a technology evolution, but it's also ecosystem and partnership evolution that is taking place now.
I think we've seen that in a lot of other areas with connectivity and even standards within the IoT ecosystem, right? You have the LoRa Alliance, and you have anybody who's kind of using LoRaWAN technologies. Other LPWAN technologies have groups kind of building that ecosystem to build up these use cases, which prove out the viability of the connectivity. Same with Wi-Fi and IoT. Those are good examples of why it's important for the ecosystem around a connectivity technology to exist and devote the resources to the buildup of those use cases, because without that, it's hard for companies to really see how the technology is going to play a role in the success of a deployment and really where it fits in the whole spectrum of different connectivity types.
Just an example, now we're running very interesting tests within the farming industry. We're working with a company that are trying to automate the the weeding control by having robots rather than having manual labor doing weeding. You're using a weeding robot that does soil probing, that has video surveillance, gathering data about the crops on the field, and all this is being done by video specialists, and it's being transmitted back to the backend systems, and with this being processed by agriculture experts and so on, and their systems. So all of these solutions together require a number of different participants and players that contribute to building a good and strong solution that brings real values to customers. It will take some time to create these new applications and services, but I think there's great opportunities and great benefits when these different players come together and understand how is value created, what are the customer needs, how can operation processes be modified and improved.
Do you have examples of how 5G is actually being tested and used by different IoT customers? Are there any kind of different cases that you've had exposure to kind of just bring this full circle for our audience?
One area where there's a lot of interest is, of course, within the private 5G networks. We have typical examples within the mining industry, for instance. We see that the mines are getting more and more connected. All the heavy machinery, the mines getting connected. And this is where 5G and private 5G networks is a perfect solution, because there is no basically coverage from the macro radio networks and so on. So that's a typical example where we see heavy industries will benefit really from 5G, and they're already doing that. Another interesting area is within the drone industry. That's really exploding now in Europe, at least. The expectations of what drones will deliver over the coming 5-6 years is tremendous. We see that's initially driven very much by the public sector. It's police, it's the armed forces, but also enterprises that are going to launch services based on drones for tracking of things or for inspections of power lines and so on. And running drones, I mean, that's a complicated business. You basically now have to fulfill the regulations that are coming, that you need to do a security assessment before you're allowed to launch a mission. And to be able to do that, you need to understand what is the situation on the ground, how much people are moving on the ground. Will you have coverage for your drone during the entire trip? How would you manage if there is a disturbance on GPS and so on? And here we see that 5G really solves a lot of the problems that comes with operating drones and drone traffic at large scale, which is not really possible to do in any other ways than using 5G and cellular technology.
I think it's important anytime we talk about these different technologies, talking about kind of not only where they are currently from kind of, I guess, where they fit into the market, but also what people are doing with them, how they are testing them, how they are potentially using them in different deployments, because that starts to kind of, I guess, bring it not just full circle, but also creates real examples for audience out there who might be wondering, okay, well, how is 5G potentially going to fit in? Is it an option? Should I even be considering it for a deployment or a solution that I'm building? So thinking kind of along that same line, what recommendations do you have for companies looking at 5G? You know, if a customer potentially is wondering, is 5G for them? How do I get started kind of on that journey? What should they be thinking about? What considerations should they have? Like, how should they be weighing whether this is a right fit or not, and so forth?
My first advice is always take a step back from the technology and rather start looking at what is your need? What is the problem that you want to address? How do you want to create value to your customers in a new way? How do you want to improve and optimize your processes? How do you want to bring a new kind of product or service to the market? And understanding that, what are the goals? And then the second step is to look at, what data would this require? What kind of processing will you need in order to deliver on these goals and missions? And then start looking at the technology. And I would say that 5G will be maybe the only solution for a couple of these use cases. I mean, we've been talking about some of those where the 4G technology just will not be able to fulfill the needs of the use case. Then there are, to be honest, a lot of use cases which are still very good served by 4G and narrowband technology based on LTE. So from that perspective, I think that they shouldn't get hung up on the technology choice initially, but that's rather a question that needs to be asked when you actually start designing the solution and how are you going to reach your goals. And I definitely think that 5G already now can be tested. I mean, if you have a connectivity partner that has 5G available today, you should definitely start testing it out. But I think for now, as I mentioned previously, the first use cases and applications that are valid for 5G are the ones that require, high bandwidth. There, I think 5G is perfect. If you have something interesting around video surveillance or automation of some kind of process or any kind of other high bandwidth requiring applications, I think 5G is perfect for that kind of use cases. So it depends very much on the needs. If you're looking at rather having low bandwidth or, use cases, then to be honest, I think it's not here today. It will be here, but then you might as well start looking at other technologies like LPWA and narrowband and so on that will be supported in 5G as well.
What are you seeing with hybrid connectivity models out there? Are you seeing kind of, we've talked before about, we're talking with the LoRa Alliance a number of weeks back about LoRa and satellite kind of coming together to provide extended coverage and opportunities to enable new use cases. How are you seeing that with kind of cellular and the 5G?
I think that, satellite is one supported technology or specified technology within 3GPP. So non-terrestrial network access for IoT is definitely something that is of interest. And we know there's a lot of initiatives going on around IoT satellites right now. And I think that's definitely of interest for certain types of use cases, primarily, where you have shipment across, water and so on, where there's no coverage of radio networks. I think satellite will play in, maybe also in areas where there are, no coverage and so on, for the cellular network. So I think these are going to complement, and we are in Telia working with some of these satellite providers to see if this could be a complement to having the terrestrial network cellular services. So there's definitely a good combination for some kinds of or use cases and applications.
So let me ask, as we wrap up here, what are you most excited about? What are you looking forward to? Where do you think we go for the rest of 2024 and 2025? And why should people be really kind of looking forward to the growth of 5G?
Looking from our perspective, I think we're doing a lot of exciting stuff with real, large customers that have services and products distributed across the globe, and they are really looking at 5G and see how is that going to improve their business and their operations and so on. I think we're looking for commercial volumes of the less advanced 5G devices. That's not going to happen probably this year, but I think next year, we're going to have a total different availability of commercially viable, lightweight products for IoT. And I think that's going to make a difference. That's going to open up a lot of new possibilities when it comes to smart cities and smart factories and so on. So I think that's something that we'll see for next year. But for now, I think there's a lot of interesting use cases around the leaders when it comes to investigating how to use 5G within in automation of factories, automation of transport and so on. So I think that's what we see most in near time when it comes to 5G.
For our audience who wants to learn more and kind of follow up on this conversation, learn what you all are doing, and just kind of stay in touch, what's the best way they can do that?
Just check out telia.com on the web, and there you find a lot about what we're doing in 5G and IoT.
Staffan, thank you so much for taking the time. Great conversation. Really appreciate it. Our audience is going to get a ton of value out of this. It's always great to talk about 5G. I think it's been a conversation on the podcast for almost, I don't know, so I want to say like 3 years almost, just, just talking about where is it? When is it officially going to be here? When should people get excited for it? What's it going to do? And I think we're at a spot now where it's still a relevant topic and it's becoming more realistic kind of than ever before. So appreciate you coming on and shedding light on kind of where we are from an industry perspective and what people should be thinking about of how 5G fits in and what it's going to enable for IoT growth.
Thank you, Ryan. Great to be on the show.